If in fact a person gives a speech and then and it goes horribly, and then they go up to give a speech again. Okay, so this is where it crosses into more of that anxiety piece, because now they're worried about a hypothetical. They're not worried about something that is happening. They're worried about how something might play out.
Welcome to Build Beyond, a podcast designed to challenge and guide you on your health journey so that you can meet your full potential. During this episode of the Build Beyond podcast, I get to talk to Brock Lutz. Brock is the Director of Health and Wellness at Hillsdale College. He's a licensed professional counselor and a chemical dependency counselor. During this episode, we talk about anxiety, and we discuss the book Unwinding Anxiety by Judson Brewer. I hope you enjoy. So today, we're talking about the book Unwinding Anxiety by Judson Brewer. But just talking about anxiety in general. We don't necessarily have to stick to the book. For me, though, as I've told you before, this is not my area of expertise. I have no professional training in any of this. So when I read the book, it's essentially 99% of the information that I have on this topic. Other than working with people who suffer from anxiety, but not treating anxiety. So I'd like to start off, Brock, what is anxiety? How do you explain it to someone? How would you explain it to someone like me who doesn't deal with it professionally and doesn't suffer from an anxiety disorder?
Well, I'm not sure if it's Judson or not. Recently, I heard a description that I'm not sure if I've ever seen it described this way before, but said in delineating between fear and anxiety, fear is the natural response that you have when you're encountering something that's troubling in some way, right? So, and it's happening. It's in the moment, and that fear is, or the anxiety is a very similar response. And so, and I'll talk about what those responses are in a second, but a very similar response, but it's more to something that you think will happen or you're worried will happen. So that's more of the mental side of anxiety, that it's not actually a response to something that is taking place. It's a hypothetical. It's you're responding to something that is more of a hypothetical. So that response, usually people tap into from a physiological standpoint, because people that experience anxiety have increased heart rate, might be a little shaky. Your temperature goes up, and sometimes in extreme situations when people are having panic or panic attacks, they might fear that actually there's something physiologically wrong with them, because you just feel on edge and your breath is starting to increase. So a lot of times people end up in the ER thinking that they're going to have a heart attack when they have more pronounced bouts of anxiety, because of worrying that maybe there's actually something more physical taking place. So you have that on the physiological end, and then internally, a person's often worrying about something that they're worried is going to take place in some capacity. So,
okay,
yeah.
Well, fear is normal. I think
Yep.
It'd be abnormal if someone said, I'm never afraid. So
Right.
Since fear and anxiety are so closely related, would you say anxiety then is a normal thing?
Yeah, I think, interestingly, Hudson takes a little bit of a different approach to this than some people do. But I think if in fact a person gives a speech and then and it goes horribly, and then they go up to give a speech again. Okay, so this is where it crosses into more of that anxiety piece, because now they're worried about a hypothetical. They're not worried about something that is happening. They're worried about how something might play out. I think we would all say, of course, that's normal that they would have that kind of response. This happened the last time. So this time you do worry a little bit about like, okay, maybe it's going to happen again. And, and so, uh, that's more situational kind of normal anxiety. I think we all would probably say as well that even if you're going to give a speech and the last 50 times it's gone fine, uh, there might be times where you still feel a little bit of anxiety. Interestingly, I think Hudson Brewer, Judson,
Judson.
Judson. So that I think Dr. Brewer would say that we tolerate that kind of anxiety more than we should. Whereas, you might be aware of the one of the TED Talks on stress and anxiety that I think the psychologist aim in giving the talk is to kind of normalize anxiety and to say, look, you're about to give a talk, your heart is racing, you're sweaty, you're a little shaky. That's normal. Just recognize that's normal. Embrace that, and that's just adrenaline, and kind of go from there. I think Dr. Brewer would say, I think we tolerate that kind of anxiety too much. And quite honestly, anxiety isn't your friend and it doesn't help you. So it might be normative, but let's not try to pretend like we should harness it. I think he would say, I think we need to work a lot harder on decreasing it. I don't know if you got that feel from reading the book, but I think that I don't think he takes that sort of anxiety is this normative thing that let's try to just harness and kind of make a normal part of our lives.
I don't remember him explicitly saying that, but that was definitely
No.
the undertone. And I think it's interesting because I would not say that I'm someone who suffers from anxiety, but the way he talked about it like that, like as you said, we kind of normalize it. Then I start to look at things in my life and I go, oh yeah, I do experience that.
Mm-hmm.
It is probably not out of control, but an abnormally stressful response to a situation that probably shouldn't be so stressful. And then maybe I hang on to those feelings for too long. And I just normalize that as, oh, it's just the way it is. That's what happens in this scenario.
Yeah.
But then I think the gist of the whole book is it doesn't have to be that way. And there are definitely tools that you can use because it could get out of control. Or even if it doesn't get out of control, you can gain more control and just not have to deal with that. And so for me, I think your point is really relevant because I'm coming into this book not needing help necessarily, but just wanting information.
Yeah.
But then starting to realize more as I went through some of these exercises that, it actually plays a bigger role in my life than I thought. So,
well, and I think his point to that is even if it isn't causing pathology, I mean, he's obviously a psychiatrist, right? So he sees primarily people that are experiencing these kind of things and it's causing significant problems in their lives.
yeah.
But I think he also does a good job of casting that net broadly to say, even if you are experiencing that kind of low level or moderate anxiety, you're not performing at your best. You're not your best cognitive self or emotional self.
Yeah.
So
That's interesting though, because then he does talk quite a lot about people who think that they are performing at their best. Their anxiety is a reward, something they do not want to get rid of because it is believed to be performance enhancing. How often do you see that here on campus?
Yeah, I think we see that quite often. So we actually went through this book, and I don't know if we've even said the title, but the name of the book is Unwinding Anxiety. And so our counseling staff, this was the book that we chose this summer to go through. So what we do is we listen to the audio book together on 1.7 speed, and and then we read through the book, and then we talk about it. And that was a thought that actually came up quite a bit, that a lot of people on our campus here at Hillsdale, but I think this is probably true of a lot of high functioning, high performing kind of type A individuals, see anxiety as this mechanism that they wouldn't be able to be motivated without. So it's like the accelerator, and if I don't feel that way, then I won't actually start working on projects. And even if I did get started, it wouldn't motivate me the same. And so that concept is I think is very prevalent here in a lot of again, high functioning, high performing places. He clearly makes the case that we are, I think he says two things. One, that's a lie, and it doesn't even, you look at the data and it doesn't even pan out as you look at how well people function and doing tasks with anxiety, without anxiety, both statistically, but also even just how they report things anecdotally. But I think he also, I think a big theme in this book is that he talks about really almost ad nauseum, is the idea of curiosity about your anxiety, and or anything that you're experiencing that is unhealthy or unwanted. That if a person were to say, I can't motivate myself if I'm not feeling this intense anxiety, certainly he would say, well, then you need to really get curious about that and ask yourself, why is that? What are the things that you want to be, the things that motivate you? And why do you think you look to this anxious feeling and thought and kind of feedback loop in order to motivate yourself? What's that about? And might there be a better way? What does he call that? Bigger, better offer.
Yeah, the BBO.
Maybe there's maybe there's actually a better way to motivate myself that actually doesn't put me through the ringer as I go through the process. Which that's the part that makes this quite different from regular cognitive behavioral therapy, which is, I would say, that the typical mainstay of how to treat anxiety from a psychiatry or counseling standpoint. So
The idea of the bigger, better offer, the BBO, he talks about that a lot. And
yeah.
He says, when anxiety is out of control, it's unrewarding, and that's to put it mildly. But once we are aware of how unrewarding anxiety is, then we can bring in the bigger, better offer.
Yeah.
But can you dive into that a little bit more? Like, what is he talking about with a bigger, better offer?
Yeah. Well, I think he uses a couple of different pools of people for his that he kind of gives examples from. So it's people who are suffering from smoking, and they want to stop, people that are overeating, people that are dealing with anxiety. So if you take some, why he talks about those things together is I think he actually makes the case that anxiety is actually kind of an addiction or compulsive behavior, just like overeating or gambling. Like, you get something from it, just like those other things. And so I think that's why he talks about a lot of those kind of things together. So the point that he's making with the bigger, better offer is, let's say every time a person gets stressed, that they go to the to the neighborhood corner store and they buy a 6-pack of beer, and so stressor is here, go get beer is here. So that's the response, so he talks about trigger and response and consequence or outcome. And so then what's the outcome? Well, the outcome is a little twofold. Stress goes down, However, that's only momentarily. What then ends up happening is that I'm irresponsible. Maybe I neglect other social relationships I might have. I don't actually get at the root of my stress. And so what the bigger, better offer is to look ahead past the drinking and saying, well, if I'm primarily dealing with my stress through alcohol, what does that usually lead to? How do I feel about that? What do I think about that? And is there a different way that I can actually handle my stress or my anxiety or whatever it might be, where I would look beyond and say, oh, well, then I would able to be actually to get at the root of my stress or the root of my problems. And then but I wouldn't feel guilty about it, or I wouldn't have to neglect other things, or I wouldn't have to be irresponsible.
Mm-hmm.
And that the bigger, better offer is accomplishing the same thing that gets at the root, right? But with less regret. It's more healthy. It's more congruent with the kind of person that I want to be in the first place, and that's how we want things to play out versus a lot of times how they do. So we talked a lot about that during our summer, discussing this. A question that came up for us a little bit, and I'll kind of kick back to you, where that bigger, better offer, slowing things down and reflecting and thinking ahead, and like some of that, where do you think that maybe that our students or patients or clients that we work with, where would they have a hard time applying that? Where would you see that falling short or being difficult for them to kind of walk out?
Social situations.
Hmm.
I think that seems to be, at least for a lot of students, when I'm trying to get them to make any kind of positive change or convince them, it's like, yeah, but my roommates don't go to bed on time, or my friend group likes to do this. I even dealt with it. There was a young married couple on campus, and we were just talking about things, and they said, well, we get together for like after church and we do Bible studies and all these things, and there's always baked goods, and there's always soda, and there's always these different things, and it would, to not provide them or to not participate would, like, culturally, would just be unusual. And I think students are in this situation where they have anxiety, maybe they're a little insecure, they're still trying to find themselves, they're developing friend groups, they're becoming adults. They could determine, like, hey, here's the bigger, better offer. Yeah. Anxiety is unrewarding, but then in that social situation, not be able to have the strength of someone like us, in our 40s, to be like, yeah, I'm not doing that. You know what I mean? Right. Not today.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's a hard thing.
So kind of looking and saying, there are consequences outside of my control that will prohibit me from actually kind of walking this out in some way.
Yeah, I think environment is, and if you could change your environment, that would be amazing. But he even talks about it in the book, that environmental change is a good thing to do, but how much can you manipulate? So if you're a recovering alcoholic, you'd have to move to a dry county, essentially, to not be tempted, to be completely tempted. And I think he mentioned environmental change as something that we should look into, but he said it's really not the answer for a lot of people, because we don't have as much control as we think we do. So I think for students, it seems like managing this environment is really, really challenging, because they don't know who they are yet.
That's right.
They don't know how to function as adults, yet we treat them as adults and hold them to adult standards. Mm-hmm. But we put them in situations that are, like summer camp, where they're, they, like, it's like we put all the toys in front of them and you should be responsible. You know what I mean? And when they're not, it's like, well, you made a bad choice. Of course they did. They don't know how to make good choices yet. So that's where, like, this whole concept of bigger, better offer, I think for me reading it, I was like, yeah, but that sounds cool. But how would you do that? Because he says to break old habits and to make new ones stick, you have to set up the necessary conditions. And I think we can all get on board with that. And he said, first, you need to make sure that the reward value of the old habit is updated. So at least you're acknowledging, hey, this is not beneficial. I shouldn't be drinking when I'm stressed, or being procrastinating on social media when I have anxiety. And then you need to find that bigger, better offer. But you need to find a reward that is more rewarding. That's tough. And that doesn't feed into the habit loop through mere substitution of a different behavior. So that is another layer of complexity. So due to the greater reward value, the BBO helps you step out of your old habit loop time and time again in the beginning. But then as it gets grooved in, it turns into your go-to. So essentially you're forming a new habit, and you're looking for an internally based bigger, better offer. So when I read through that, I was like, that's a lot of steps.
Right.
That is not something I can just hand someone a pamphlet and be like, hey, just do a bigger, better offer. So one of my questions reading that is, how do you even start? Like, how do you work with someone? How do they find an internally based bigger, better offer that clearly has a better reward that actually can actually be implemented in a complex environment away from a therapist? Where do you even start?
Yeah, oh, that's right. Well, and I think even getting back to the environmental excuse, I'll call it that. I think what's important is helping them to see. You just use the word complex. Helping them to see that, look, these things are extremely complex. And when I used to work in a 30-day drug rehab, and we would work really hard on doing relapse prevention with them. Okay, you've been sober for 30 days. First time you've been sober for 30 days in years. So now what are you going to go do? And, a lot of times they did have an environmental answer, and actually an environmental solution. They could say, you know what, I'm not moving back to Cleveland. I'm moving with my dad in Omaha. And then what would happen when they went to Omaha? They would find addicts. They would start using again, because you follow yourself wherever you go, and even if we could change environment, which sometimes is possible, it's so much more complicated than that. And so one of the things I like about his approach, so typical cognitive behavioral therapy for anxiety, and you and I were talking earlier about how most people get diagnosed with anxiety from their doctors. Okay, so you go in, talk about things, and I will tell you, 99% of the time, this is what people are going to walk away with. The doctor's going to say, here's this medicine. Sometimes a slow-acting medicine, sometimes something like Xanax or Klonopin or Valium, which those are bad medications. And I'm sorry, there are, of course, there are exceptions, but realistically, you know how Xanax works? Like 3 shots of Jack Daniels. It's the exact same receptor in your brain. It hits you So realistically, save money on Xanax, go buy Jack Daniels. If that's what you want to do, it does exactly the same thing. I'm not advocating for that. I don't think that's a good idea either. But so sometimes they're long acting like a Zoloft. Sometimes they're short acting. But then they always say, go do cognitive behavioral therapy. I don't even think most doctors understand what that means. But cognitive behavioral therapy basically says this. It's cognitive behavioral. So basically the idea is this. You're having an unwanted emotion, and that's anxiety. And that's being caused by these thought patterns that you have. So the premise behind CBT is unhealthy thoughts or thought patterns equal unhealthy or unwanted emotions. So if you change this, this will change. Great idea. Works some of the time, right? You know, as a clinician, it's important for us to sometimes point out things like all or nothing thinking. Well, I worked out 3 days in a row, but then I didn't work out the fourth day, so I thought, well, I've blown it. And it's like, well, that's not true. You didn't blow it. Actually, you worked out 3 times in 4 days. That's really good because three months ago you hadn't worked out in 6 weeks. And so it's good to be able to identify things like that and to get them to engage in more healthy thinking. It's just very simplistic. And what I do like about what Dr. Brewer does and talks about is that this whole thing is complex and it's complicated. And so how do we do it? Because there's not just 3 easy steps. And I don't know about you, but I am, whenever anyone comes to me and says, here are 3 easy steps to change this really significant thing in your life, I'm like, okay, you lost me. Because I just know that it's just more complicated than that, right? So what I like about his approach is that he does acknowledge that complexity. And I think that the solution is predicated on working on ourselves. I mean, I think of how many times, even in this conversation so far, you've brought up things like identity, or you've brought up, the meaning behind why someone would do that. Or I brought up curiosity. Well, those aren't just mental things. Those are actually deeply spiritual things, right? We're talking about what gives someone meaning and purpose in life. So to me, I think he actually does a really good job of saying, when we're looking at anxiety, we need to look at all the different drivers that are going on. So he talks a lot about, think about what your thoughts are. Think about how you are responding to emotion. So he's hitting that emotional level. He doesn't hit on as much. I mean, you and I both read the book, Why We Sleep, in the last year. But the truth of it is, poor sleep can be a huge driver of anxiety, right? Just maybe someone's drinking too much caffeine. Maybe there are other factors going into why they're not sleeping well. And so there might be physiological reasons why someone is engaging in anxiety. There might be relational or family reasons or financial reasons why someone is engaging in anxiety, or that they're experiencing anxiety. There might be bad time management practices that are going on, So to me, I think what his curiosity piece gets at is, it says, you need to be curious about why you're ending up, why the result of a lot of different things in your life is anxiety. And you need to think about those things, and you need to ask hard questions about those things. So really, how I'm answering your question is, I think in order to get at the root of a lot of it and see the reward versus the bigger, better offer, it really does take us doing a deep dive into ourselves and developing ourselves and thinking about how we move on from things and how we deal with life and problems and habits that we have. So to me, I think what he's talking about opens this bigger door into, there's a lot of different parts of myself that I need to think about and examine. And that was actually probably the thing that, as we talked about this as a clinical counseling staff this summer, that we said we thought students would have the hardest time with, or that people would have the hardest time with, because so much, think about all the different things that he says in this book that are predicated on self-reflection and kind of quieting yourself. So, you're attentive to what emotion you're feeling. You're attentive to what do I want to do with this emotion? You're attentive to, how have I dealt with this emotion in the past that's been destructive? And then you reflect on, well, how do I want to deal with that differently? All of that is based on a person being able to quiet themselves and experience some kind of level of self-reflection, which is possible for everyone. But in our current culture um, that is so driven by screens and noise and quiet or productivity and hurry, I think we actually said we thought that would be the biggest challenge to students being able to walk this out, is because it is so built on, you need to be a person who reflects and slows down and thinks about your actions and your choices and your emotions. And that is very, very difficult for people to do.
So you're talking about mindfulness then,
Yep, for
building
sure.
that practice. 'Cause he
Yep.
talked a lot about that. I think when he talked about different management strategies, and one of them that he addressed first is willpower and how
Mhm.
bad that is. That it's arguable what research wise whether we even have, if there are there actually individuals that have unreal willpower. I have
Mhm.
met some who do.
Yeah, I have two.
I think the military tends to attract those people, so maybe I've seen a
Mhm.
higher, I don't know, a bigger collection of them, but they're
Yep.
very rare. And even in the military, you'll get people, that especially when people go through like highly specialized training, no one weak goes into those, and they have such a high attrition rate
Yeah.
because the people with that true willpower, they get discovered.
Yeah.
So for most people, willpower is out. And then he says substitution, which is a common strategy. He says with like alcoholics or
Mhm.
people who are with nicotine addictions. But he said still, it's that you could be substituting a bad habit for a bad habit. And then he says you could prime your environment, which we've talked about a little bit. But then the one that he really, I think, where he puts a lot of his emphasis is mindfulness.
Yeah.
And I think he addresses it right off the bat. A lot of people are turned off. They're going to feel like this is touchy feely. He even has a story about how he didn't really want to get into it, because some people who are maybe resistant to being spiritual or religious, they don't want to go down that route. Other people who
Mhm.
are highly religious don't want to open themselves up to some type of practice that may not,
Right.
they're very aware of that. So depending on what you call it,
Mhm.
it could be called different things. Like meditation would be kind of a subset of
Mhm.
mindfulness, but mindfulness, I think you just did a great job of explaining it. It's this complex process of being present
Mhm.
and analyzing, not judging, but being aware of what is. And then that was for him one of the ways to find your bigger, better offer, which I think is super fascinating. And I've been playing around with it. I don't have anything serious to work on. So the one thing
Yeah.
is I drink a ton of caffeine. So I was like, and I can go off coffee for like, I have willpower to a certain extent. So I can go off coffee. If you challenge me to do something, I can do it. And
Yeah.
I'll do it for a year if there's a challenge to it, but it's not sustainable. So I was like, can I be mindful with caffeine and coffee and
Mhm.
produce a bigger, better offer?
Yeah.
And I'm like a few weeks into it, but it is a fascinating thing because what I did was I tied caffeine and coffee to an experience where I'll just drink it habitually throughout the day and I don't have any problem
Yeah.
sleeping with it. But now I won't. The it's not The first cup is amazing. After that, it progressively gets less, I don't know, desirable and less rewarding. And there's an example in the book about chocolate, some research done on chocolate, how, if you love chocolate, the first bite is amazing. But at some point in the process, if you eat enough, it's actually repulsive.
Yeah.
So when I have that
Have
first
you have,
cup,
have you only noticed the progression of coffee and in its attractiveness or desirability since you've started being mindful about it?
I've just never thought about it. It's just
Sure.
something
Okay.
that's never occurred
Yeah.
to me. So like I'll be really mindful when I'm drinking that first cup of coffee before the kids
Mhm.
wake up and how much I enjoy it.
Yeah.
There's an experience. At
Mhm.
that point, if the kids are waking up, the experience is dead.
Yeah.
I am just sipping on lukewarm coffee. And then
Sure.
for the rest of the day, I'm consuming something that there's no experience. So I will say if there's no, I will enjoy that experience and be mindful of it. If
Mm-hmm.
I have another cup of coffee, I'd make that decision. I have to be mindful of it. Is the experience worth it? And
Right.
oftentimes it's not. So I'll
Mm-hmm.
finish it, but I'll just start to tie that to it. Like I don't, this isn't really serving me right now. I'm not getting anything out of this. I'm not enjoying it. The
Yeah.
caffeine isn't necessary. I don't need it.
Mm-hmm.
There's no real health benefit at this point. I'm just, it's a habit that I don't like. So it doesn't
Yeah.
serve me. But there'll be other times, where an opportunity will present itself to have multiple cups of coffee, but every time the experience is what I want. It may be another cup with my wife, or
Yeah.
I get a rare 15 minutes where I can read and I want to have a cup of coffee with it. So that allows me to, I don't know. It's not a great example for anyone listening who is legitimately suffering from anxiety. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll admit that it's not on par with that, but it's an interesting practice and not
Mm-hmm.
something that, I don't know, has ever really occurred to me. Is it
Mm-hmm.
something that you use with people? Is it successful?
Well, I mean, to jump back to your example really quick, I think it's a better example than you might want to acknowledge. I mean, because I think first of all, it's an example of here's this behavior that I do every day and I've done for quite some time. And I do without thinking about it, which we all do those kind of things, right? And as I just slowed myself down, I mean, I imagine you didn't, uh, you also didn't commit hours and hours a day to it, right? It was just all you did is say, I'm going to think about this more. I'm going to be attentive to it. I'm going to reflect on it. And I'm going to just ask myself some questions. Why do I do that? What's that about? Um, and then ask yourself, are there scenarios when actually it's less desirable or more desirable? So to me, I think that's the spirit behind what we're trying to get people to do. Last week I had about a 3-day period where I made a conscious decision to distance myself from my phone, especially more than I typically do. And I found myself reaching for my phone at these times, and it was interesting to kind of take a step back and to say, and he talks about that a lot, right? Like actually use that word and use that sound. I wonder what that's about, right? And it was usually when I was bored or when I was stressed.
Hmm.
And so um so it was good for me to kind of look at and see of at those times, it is there. I mean, first of all, if I were then to go to my phone when I'm bored, um, maybe especially when I'm stressed, does that deal with my stress? Like, does that help me solve it? Does it help me, you know, and is there a better way to do that? And I think over the years, what I've recognized, um, I do a lot of deep breathing. I do. For me, it is more of a spiritual thing. So I'll breathe prayers, but I'm not just breathing. I am doing more like actual diaphragmatic breathing or heart breathing, or however. There's lots of ways to describe it. And where I recognize sometimes I connect to a little monitor that I have where it can read my HRV or my heart rate, and I can see my heart rate drop. I can see my rhythms become more cyclical, but I also pair it with something spiritual. That is a much better way for me, to be able to say, here's this emotion or this urge that I might have. And so I'm actually just going to do what he says. I think it's probably, I guess, just described in his RAIN exercise, that you
Mhm.
just slow yourself down, you acknowledge kind of whatever it is that you're feeling at that point, and you just sit with it. You don't have to argue against it or anything like that, which again, going back to cognitive behavioral therapy, is almost, it is cognitive behavioral therapy is a mental tug of war with the thing you're fighting against, and you have to win. And the reality is sometimes you don't have to win. If you're experiencing anxiety, sometimes you don't have to win. Sometimes all you have to do is sit with it and absorb it, and it's like a wave. It can pass, and then you can move forward. And he talks about that a lot. Kevin Majors, who's a psychologist who's come and spoken at the college a couple of times, he talks about that a lot. He talks about that idea of anxiety getting stronger when you avoid it and you act like you can't think about it, and that actually it starts to lose its power and significance when you just sit with it. When, again, to use Dr. Brewer's language, when you get curious about it, when you see that it might have a positive impact, or maybe it's just something I'm experiencing right now. I'm going to sit, I'm going to breathe for 2 or 3 minutes and just focus on my breathing, or I'm going to pray, or I'm going to do whatever. And then I'm going to see, can it just run its course? And, I think when the person has willpower, I don't know, someone that has willpower, what do you see them doing at those moments? Because I think a lot of times that's an important thing to talk about, because I think that's what a lot of people aspire to. So the people that you've seen that have willpower like that, I guess 2 questions I have is, at that moment when they're experiencing normal anxiety like we talked about, what do they do at those times? And also, what are the other aspects of their life like? Would we look at them and say, you have willpower, but would we also look at them and go, you are a healthy, well-rounded human being, and I want to be like you? Because I wonder if that comes at a cost,
Yeah,
so.
That's a good question. Yeah. So yeah, I wouldn't want to be like most of them. You know what I mean? Like there's something unusual. One that comes to mind that maybe people have seen, there's that movie. It was kind of a documentary where the guy free climbs something in Yellowstone.
Yeah, El Capitan or Half Moon or whatever it is. Yep.
But he has something actually different about his brain. I forget what it was. I've
never seen it, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, they actually did brain scans on him. He's missing something.
Yeah.
That he almost doesn't overthink. He doesn't have fear. I don't want to quote it, but he is anatomically different. So someone would look at him and be like, from the outside, like, wow, the willpower to train, and the willpower to live in a van, and the willpower to climb all day. And it's like, no, he's got a different brain. He's built different. So yeah, I think there are some people, that maybe I would meet or experience or work with in the military where, they had a different life before and they just made a change.
Yeah.
And then they joined the Marines or they joined the Navy, and then they just rose up. They just excelled in that environment. And you look at it, it's just like, it looks like a story of pure willpower. Yeah. For some of them, it's like, no, their life was so bad before, and this is so much better. And they're so thankful. Yep. So you could go in that direction where it's just, they're excelling finally because they have support, they have a team, and they have people challenging them, and they're rising to that challenge. They have that. It's ignited that spark. And then the other people, to your point, you wouldn't want their home life, but you would look at them.
You wouldn't want to be married to them, or
No, you look at them function, and it's like, they are incredible. And if you only have this myopic view of willpower, you would think that they're superhuman, and they are to certain extents, but that they're also an alcoholic, or you know what I mean? They're not. There are just very few people that I think have willpower across the board, or they may have anger issues that they can't deal with, or there's other things. So yeah, to your point, it's, I think that some people can have willpower in certain areas. Some people have a limited amount of willpower, but it's infinite if you focus on one thing, but everything else just disintegrates. Yeah. So yeah, and I think that's probably why it's not a good strategy. Because even for someone like me, I feel like I have more willpower and I can focus for a period of time. And that could be a long period by some people's standards, but it's not, I can't do it for my whole life necessarily, unless I had some type of motivation. For example, I could become a vegan if it was going to save my life. I don't want to, but I could, and if I had to flip that switch, I would just have the willpower. Like there would never be a discussion with my doctor about how hard it is or whatever. It's like, yeah, but it's going to save my life. So, and some people don't have that. So I think it seems like there's varying levels of it, but it's almost not worth discussing in a way, because if someone's like, oh, I should just have the willpower, it's like, we gotta, no, like that is never a solution. And if it is, I don't know why you're here. Then just flip the switch and get out of my office and don't
just
pay
go
me.
Do it.
Yeah, just go do it. Then you don't need me.
Yep.
Here's a pamphlet. Stop drinking alcohol. Then have fun.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you just can't. Most people just can't do it, and that's why the thing with mindfulness I think is so interesting, because some of the stuff you talk about, like meditating or praying, takes time. And so that's a big, for any therapy. Let's say someone's got low back pain. If I'm trying to get them to add something to their life, I don't have time for that. Mindfulness, though, is this larger umbrella term. And I love the way he doesn't describe it in a paragraph. It's a theme throughout the book where, yeah, you could meditate. That is a form of it. He also talks about loving kindness as another strategy. There's a bunch of strategies, but mindfulness in general is just being curious and present in the moment. So you're already experiencing something. It's not adding time. You're going through it. So as you just go through, you don't have to be like, well, I need to find time to do this. You've got anxiety. It's coming tomorrow. When it hits, let's be curious and mindful. It doesn't take any extra time. Let's ask these questions. Does this benefit me? There's so many different strategies he goes through, but that's what I really love about the mindfulness topic, is that I'm not asking someone to add anything. It's like you're giving them the tool to deal with what is definitely coming. Here's an actual shield. You know what I mean? So you can not stop it, but withstand it. And ride it out. And then on the other end, still be alive and be like, oh, that wasn't as bad. This is a good shield, or this is a good method. So I feel like he goes through so much on mindfulness and then awareness. And I just feel like as a healthcare provider who didn't learn this, I feel cheated in a way. You know what I mean? Because we're dealing with different things, but the same people, right? So
absolutely.
The same people, and we're working the same health center. So, but literally, like the same person with anxiety who's coming to you is coming to me for some type of joint pain.
Right.
So, wouldn't the skills that we both need to deal with the person and help them, wouldn't they be very similar? And yet, I didn't learn any of this stuff. Like, how do I help them? Because if they're struggling with anxiety, are they going to do what they need to do for their knee pain? I don't know. And maybe if the anxiety goes down, the knee pain goes away. I don't know. It's just, it's such a going through all this stuff. And I really like, he gets from mindfulness to awareness, which I think ties back to curiosity. So these are all just different words for seemingly what is the same thing. And he does warn people, though, because he says, as you start to work through this, there is the overthinking trap, where you start to diagram and diagnose, and it becomes a source of anxiety in itself, because he says this is not intellectual training when you're sitting with this. So don't fall into the trap of understanding how reward valuation works in the brain and then go trying to think your way out of it, right? If the mind starts turning this into an intellectual exercise, trying to think your way out of worry, or think your way out of overeating or any other habit, then you need to simply notice and perhaps map that as its own habit loop and then ask yourself, what do I get from this? So bringing your awareness into the embodied experience, which is what I think you were talking about.
Yeah.
And then you focus on the question, what do I get from this? What does the result of this behavior feel like when you simply bring the behavior into the mind? How hard is that, though, for students who come onto campus, who are here to overthink? You know
Oh
what I
yeah.
mean? And faculty
Right.
members who are PhDs
Mm-hmm.
who get paid to overthink.
Right.
How do you keep people, and even for people who aren't in academia,
Mm-hmm.
how do you get them to not overthink this? Because you're giving them the skills to overthink.
Yeah.
How do you
Yeah.
avoid that trap?
Yeah. No, I think the reason he brings it up is because it is such a natural thing to go into. And really what he keeps calling people back is, it really is to intuition, to, stay in this experiential place, don't get too emotional. There's a psychologist who talks about, we have an emotional mind and we have a rational mind, and then as the two overlap in the middle, those two concentric circles, you have what she calls the wise mind. And so you don't want to go too far to the extremes, but you have to recognize that you want to evaluate, but you also want to keep coming back to, and what's that like for me? And I think the reason why I think so much of what he says meshes with what we talk about here at Hillsdale is because it is so, I mean, you're basically using the Socratic method with yourself. I mean, we structure our classrooms on, hey, so let's read this book or this selection, and then let's just ask questions about it and let's dig around. And we don't want to be too like right, right brain analytical, right? But we also don't want to just be like emotional left brain people either. I think I flipped that around, but and so trying to get and to understand that there's a balance of these different things. And I think it is challenging. I think what you constantly want to keep people going back to, well, let's see what worked and what didn't work, because we're changing things. So I want you to try something different, or are you ready to try something different? Are you sick of it yet? Because or are you still tied to the way that you think it would work? I also, and then I think what we do is we try to get them to then try these different things to see, like, you know what, I was able to do that. And that actually went okay. I was able to not feel like working out. And yet I did it for just 20 minutes and I felt so much better afterward that I stayed for another 15, So getting them to see that they have agency, getting them to see that you want to ask questions and be curious. And again, keep going back to that whole person perspective and living, which to me, I think a lot of the questions that he's talking about, there's the one section, probably one of my favorite sections, is when he says all of this is an FGO. It's a flipping growth opportunity, but he doesn't say flipping.
Yeah.
And because again, it's hard stuff. And we recognize, as we start to ask these questions of ourselves, we start to understand, oh wow, I typically respond emotionally to things, or no, I typically respond rationally, and I'm just like, I don't see what the problem is. That's stupid. Why did you do that? And we then start to say, well, wait a minute. As a human, what am I supposed to be doing anyway? Because am I supposed to be productive all the time? Is that what being a human means? And we start to see, actually, it means being productive. It means learning how to rest. It means having good relationships with other people and have a meaning and a purpose in life and having habits that are congruent with the kind of person I want to be. And life is a never ending process of trying to talk about all those things. I remember one time I was talking about that to the RAs about, kind of that whole person piece. And our chaplain here at the college got up after me and he said, "Look, you're just talking about integrity." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, think about it. Like integrity, integrated. Like we think integrity means you're moral. Integrity means your choices match up with your beliefs, and then that feels good, and then that connects with your relationships." And he says, think about the opposite of that. The opposite of integrating yourself is disintegrating yourself. And if you're disintegrated, then a lot of times what we're doing is just focusing on one part of who we are. So it actually, like a person that has high willpower actually might be a very disintegrated person because they're really just developing one aspect of themselves, but they don't quite know how to interact with other humans, or they don't quite know how to grieve the loss of something very close with them. Well, those things are somewhat the essence of being human is about. So again, what I like about so much of what he says is that I think it does almost force us to ask these bigger, maybe more existential questions of how we're walking through life and how do we want to walk through life,
Yeah, I really enjoyed the FGO section
Yeah.
because he ties it to growth mindset, and we use
Right.
that in physical wellness course, and
Mm-hmm.
growth mindset just as that belief that you can change.
Yep.
And I think, for people who have growth mindset, you're like, I know the first time I heard about it, someone was explaining to me, it was like, oh, Carol Dweck and all this stuff. And my initial reaction was like, duh, you know what I mean? Like, of course.
Yeah.
But if you're dealing with someone who doesn't believe they can change or is unsure, maybe this is who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a fundamental, like a foundational piece that's missing there. Like they have to understand that it is possible and believe that it's possible. And then
I'll tell you what we've seen in the last maybe 10 years with working with young people is part of growth mindset is what you just said, right? Which is I can change, I'm dynamic, that sort of thing. Another part of it though, and I think this is the FGO part, is understanding hard things are good for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what we've seen over the last 10 or 15 years, even in our culture, is that when things are challenging, people feel like something's wrong. Mm. If someone feels down, then they say, something's wrong, give me a medication. And it's actually like, well, you actually might be experiencing those feelings for a certain reason. Again, maybe you're disintegrated, or maybe you're just focusing on your emotions. And, so to me, that's also another part of both growth mindset and what he talks about, and what Dr. Majors talks about that too, is seeing anxiety as an opportunity, seeing it as a way you can grow. What is going to the gym for you? Sure, it's a way of feeling better and all that. You know what else it is? It's a chance for you to do something that sometimes you don't want to do. And when you do that, you grow. Your soul grows when you do something because you know it's a good thing for you, and that will sharpen you and form you in some way. That's so important. And I think we're losing that as a culture. We're losing that grit, and that resiliency is important. I think that's another challenge too. So,
yes, there is this perception that, the absence of, like, you shouldn't have pain and you shouldn't have struggle. So if those two exist, something needs to be fixed, mm-hmm. which is honestly like the premise of chiropractic. It's like a frustrating thing to think about. And it's not that all chiropractors practice this way, but it's this idea that, like, you come in, you're in pain, that is abnormal, and then I need to fix you. Yeah. And then once you get broken again, I can continue to fix you.
Yeah.
And it creates disability, in my opinion, because
Yeah.
people constantly feel like they're broken or they're in a state of disrepair and that they could
Mm-hmm.
break at any time. There's a fragility to it. There's
Right.
no FGO at that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't see it as a growth opportunity. They see it as the opposite. They're
Right.
breaking down. There's these machines that are just crumbling, and luckily they have me to help put them back together.
Yeah.
And I think in healthcare, there are some instances for that. I would say a surgeon
Right.
puts people back together, quite literally, cuts them up and puts them back together. So yeah, we can do that. But for most of us who
Mm-hmm.
don't use a scalpel,
Mm-hmm.
well, looking at someone as if they're broken takes away the opportunity to have an FGO. You know what I mean? Like
Yep, that's right.
you're in
Yeah.
pain, good. And honestly, like for me, and when I get in pain, physical pain, which happens all the time in different joints, I start to look at it that way as a
Mm-hmm.
provider who helps people with pain. I go, oh, this is a new knee pain.
That's right.
Cool. Awesome. I'm going to figure, you know what I mean? Like this
Yeah.
is I haven't never used the term FGO, but it's like, it is a growth opportunity because
Yeah.
I'm not going to freak out. I'm going to figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm just going to be more sympathetic and empathetic for people who, have, because I've never had the pain before. It's like, ooh, this is
Yeah.
interesting. I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious. How are we going to work through this? So finding creative ways to translate that to patients,
Yeah.
I think is fun. But
Mm-hmm.
going back to growth mindset is something that maybe some of us take for granted. I know I do,
Mm-hmm.
or have in the past. Well, if they don't have a growth mindset and they don't understand that concept, it's like, okay, let's lay that down first. And that he talks about what we called in the Marines PMA, like a positive mental attitude, and how important that was. It was almost a punchline, you know what I mean? Like when things are just awful, it's like, just a PMA, man. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of a joke, but he says a quote in here, and I can't remember who actually said this quote, but he says, "Watch your thoughts; they become your words. Then watch your words because they become your actions. Watch your actions; they become your habits. Watch your habits; they become your character. Watch your character; it becomes your destiny." So at the foundational level, if you don't have a growth mindset and you don't see an FGO presenting itself, your thoughts, they go in the wrong direction often. And that just sets you up. And then it's a cascade of failures. And then someone comes at that later stages to someone like you, and it has already become their destiny.
Right.
So and then you got to peel back those layers and be like, no, the premise was wrong at the beginning.
That's right.
This is actually pretty normal. Like I'd be shocked if with what you went through as a child, I'd be shocked if you didn't have this problem. You know what I mean? Or you weren't experiencing these symptoms. It's actually maybe quite a normal response to a certain degree. You know what I mean? It has gotten out of control, but I don't know that the depths of this thinking, again, it's just something that I did not get in grad school. We just get taught how to diagnose and fix.
Right.
And then when someone is non-compliant, if they don't do what I tell them, if they don't do, I gave you a prescription and you didn't follow it, and it's like, well, is that their fault or is it? You know what I mean? It's interesting because I was thinking about like a coaching analogy. If you have a coach who gets hired, gets paid millions of dollars, or a CEO, maybe that's a good example, and then the team fails or the company fails, they can't be like, well, I had a good plan. They just, my mid-level managers or my team, the team didn't implement the plan. That whoever is paying your salary is going to be like, you're terrible and you're gone. But as a healthcare provider, I can be like, yeah, it's non-compliant. I had a good plan and they didn't follow it. It's like, why do I get that leeway?
Or you can do worse, which is what modern healthcare does, is you can just treat the symptom then.
Yeah.
And like you said, what ends up happening then is, so let's say someone, and look, this is true, whether it's chiropractic, whether it's strength training, whether it's or whether it's someone who's a PA or a psychiatrist or a counselor or a doctor or whatever it might be, that someone comes in and we can all do things to treat the symptom. And yet if someone comes to me and I think, a lot of times people will say, oh, Well, people get on antidepressants and there's a black box label because they can become more suicidal. You know why I think more people become suicidal when we put them on antidepressants? Because we give them a medicine and actually kind of convince them that this is going to be the thing that fixes them, and it doesn't, because it's only one part of the problem, right? And we look at people, and you're right. It's like, you're struggling with something. What's your story? What's your family story? What's your relational history? What are things you that have been struggles for you and that you've succeeded with? And we want to look at all these different parts of who they are. And everything that I just said is almost completely antithetical to modern healthcare, because in psychotherapy, in chiropractic work, in medical care, it is all about efficiency, and it's a machine, and it's cranking out appointments and ICD codes as quick as you possibly can. And you know what that means? You're not going to sit down with a person and know them and see them as a person. You're going to provide something really quick that you can check off, and you can charge your $185 for your, 90801 appointment. And then you're going to go to the next one that you're going to see for 7 minutes. And that isn't how we help people. And yet that is modern healthcare. And I think, we have to be able to zoom out more and say, look, this isn't going to be an easy fix. And again, going back to the book, it's why I really like the book, because you can't read the book and go, oh, okay, this is going to be simple. No, you're going to actually have to put some work in, and it would be insulting to you to look at this big problem that you're having in your life and to tell you that I can fix it easy. I mean, first of all, it's that's wrong. It's also a bit narcissistic, right? Which I think we could have a whole nother podcast on that probably, but
the author, he talks about being a medical resident before going down the route of psychology, just working in a hospital. And his supervisor said something, and it said, it's true, unrelated. And I think that's kind of what we're describing, how healthcare works. So X could be happening, that is true. And then Y could be happening, that is also true. But that doesn't mean that X caused Y to happen.
Yeah.
But that's how you get reimbursed, right? Connecting those dots as quickly as possible, as many times as possible.
Yeah.
And that's how people's brains work, that post hoc fallacy. If something happens after something else, obviously that caused it. And it's an effective sales tool for marketing. You know what I mean? And so, I typically draw this back to chiropractic, and I do it intentionally, not because I don't like my profession, but because I don't really like talking trash about other people's professions. I'm well aware that this is not a chiropractic problem universally, but if someone comes in with low back pain and I x-ray them and I show them that x-ray, I'm going to find things. Mm-hmm. So now they have a visual. Mm-hmm. So you have pain. This is true. This is X. And you have an x-ray with x-ray findings, degenerative disc disease or whatever, you got osteophytes. That is also true. Now, if I say your back pain is because of this, you know what I mean? And they believe that, I've sold, now I can, and insurance will buy that. You know what I mean? Like, I can milk insurance then, and I can keep someone coming back for long periods of time, even on paying cash. And then I use the same logic to keep them coming, because, you were in pain. That is true. I provided 6 weeks of treatment 3 times a week. And now you are at the end of 6 weeks, you are in less pain. That is also true. Therefore, I fixed you. Right. You know what I mean? And it's like, no, none of that is, not saying that there's not a relationship there, because certainly there is, but this whole idea of true, unrelated, I think it's something that I didn't understand going into healthcare. I got into this business and this practice because I understood the exact opposite of that, because that's how it was always described to me. And now I feel like trying to explain that to people is hard, because what are you saying, that my other doctor lied, or you know what I mean? Like, you're saying I wasted a bunch of money, and they're hard conversations to have, but I feel like if someone really needs help and they really need to change, if it's not addressed, it is quite difficult. And I think that's, to me, it seems like dealing with someone, if you were going to treat anxiety, you're going to be mindful and present and curious and ask all these questions. There's a lot of uncomfortable things that have to be at least thought about, probably discussed and faced. And that's a
it's
hard,
probably not going to be simple.
yeah. And that's a hard
It's not going to be
sell.
quick. Right. Yeah.
That's a hard sell. It's way more enticing to, if that's your sales pitch, what I just said, and then they get on Instagram and it's like 3 steps to manage your
Yeah.
anxiety.
Right.
That's way more palatable.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, people will pay more money for stuff like that. It's like, if you look at like the hours of time you could spend with someone to help them work through whatever their problem is, that's not as valuable, because it's hard work, but it's, for some reason, it's incredibly valuable to purchase something that won't work, but just looks easier.
Yeah. Right.
And I think that's my main problem with treating symptoms. It's not the treatment of the symptoms. I don't have any problem. I mean, I don't have a professional opinion on medication. That's something between a patient and a doctor, because I don't prescribe medication, but I don't have a problem with it. I don't have a problem with vaccinations. I don't have a problem with manual therapy. I don't have a problem with any of these treatments. I have a problem with all of these treatments when the person selling the treatment or recommending the treatment says that it's something that it's not. You know what I mean? Like, this is the fix. This is the answer.
It's the magic bullet.
This is it. This is what you're missing. This is the problem. And it's like, what? You spent how many minutes with this person?
Yeah.
And the one thing that you sell happens to fix that. Like, how many times is that going to actually happen statistically, where the root cause, the singular root cause of, and the interesting thing, just again, not to bash on chiropractors, but the singular root cause of everybody, if you come to a chiropractor, is you have an absence of chiropractic adjustments, right? Everybody gets adjusted. You know what I mean? So it's like, and that'll fix everything. It's the main thing that's wrong with everybody. And if you keep doing it, and it's the same thing. It's like, if you have low back pain and you come to a chiropractor, guess what you're missing? You're missing adjustments. If you go to a shoe salesman, guess what's wrong? You have the bad shoes. If you go to a mattress salesman, guess what's wrong? Your mattress sucks. You know what I mean? And I imagine it's the same way in mental health, where if you go somewhere and that's what they do and that's their belief, and it's like, you're not going to get a well-rounded opinion with options that respect your autonomy and then allow you to actually have informed consent. It's like, how do you have informed consent if you at least don't have at least a mild understanding of the breadth of your options and what the second and third order consequences and benefits of all of those choices are? And that takes time, and you don't get reimbursed for that, unfortunately, with insurance, to go through all of this stuff. So it is like this, at least for me, kind of this, I don't know, this circle. This is like this maddening, perpetual thing that it's hard for people to get off of. And as I'm reading about anxiety, I'm like, oh, you guys got it way worse in mental health. This is way harder. You know what I mean? But then I acknowledge that those are it's the same people. Like, a lot of these people that you're dealing with who are going through all of this, whether they have help or not, that is their life. And then they come into me and it's like, I have low back pain. And it's like, when you ask the questions, I would be surprised if you didn't. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot going on in your life right now. Low back pain is the worst of your worries. And yes, I can provide a treatment. I can crack a back or do some soft tissue that will treat the symptoms temporarily. But we gotta
Let's look at this bigger picture here.
Yeah, and I can help you with some of it, but I
Yeah.
can connect you with other people who can help with other things, and you need to at least acknowledge that, but then also to respect their autonomy and not think that I know what's best for them. Like, here's step one, this is what you should do.
Yeah.
And then this gets into the motivational interviewing, which, you know, you and I have talked a lot about, and it's just, again, mind-blowing to me that all healthcare providers don't have a foundational, that we don't set a foundation of this type of communication for us to at least understand. Like you said, like, people recommend cognitive behavioral therapy and they don't even know what it is.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, well, that would be, you know, that would be a beneficial thing for if physicians are going to, if that's their go-to, that they have a really good understanding of what they're recommending.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and to offer a pretty simplistic reason why that's the case is because think of how often healthcare professionals are trained to ask closed-ended questions. You know,
100% of the time.
so where is your pain?
Yeah.
How long have you been having your pain? Yeah. How seldom we ask things like, hey, so describe your anxiety to me and what it's been like for you to live with your anxiety. Totally different question, right? You know,
Yeah.
and I think again we're set up for fast and checklist kind of assessments and not more qualitative relational kind of interactions, and so I think that's an important piece too. So I probably need to go just because I have a I have to be in Chelsea around 12:30 or so, but
Okay.
but
Sounds good. Yeah, we got
so
through about half of what I've
I
got notes.
figured.
I've got notes spread out all over here because, like, I really want to get into, and maybe it's just an offline conversation, or maybe we could record
Yeah.
it, the anxiety as an identity,
Yeah.
because I
Right.
just feel like that is a rabbit hole of, I don't know how people escape from that. And
Yeah.
there are so many that, and then the concept of forgiveness,
Yeah.
how, what that, the role that plays in all of this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. There's, and then loving kindness is another thing, which one of those
Mm-hmm.
things that he talked about, like, oh, you know, when I first heard about loving kindness, I thought this was going to be not something I was interested in. But, you know, when you read about it, it's like, wow, that's a good way to deal with certain things for certain people, you know, different than
Yeah, that's right.
another type of mindfulness,
Mm-hmm.
another practice. And there's just there's so many nuggets in this book where it's like, I want him sitting next to me when I'm dealing with a patient, just like
Yeah.
whispering in my ear, like, you know, go down this hole, or like ask
Yep.
this question, and open-ended question,
Okay.
and just see what comes out. You know,
Yep.
I don't know. It's a fascinating
Yeah.
book.
He really is someone that you read his book and you say, well, I'd like to have lunch with this guy. You know, I mean, he seems very smart, very intuitive, but also very kind, very human. And so, yeah. Well, we'll have to grab lunch or do something and
Yeah,
talk about some of the other ones, whether it's online or offline. It'd
yeah.
be
I would like
great to
that.
do that. So,
I'd love to hear
so
that. Get in a discussion with the other counselors too. I don't know if you guys
yeah.
are getting together still this summer to talk about this. I when we did the eating disorder book a couple of years ago,
Mm-hmm.
I learned so much from that. It was just really just from sitting there and like, oh, huh,
Yeah.
that's what, you know, listening to people who have had an eating disorder, who treat eating
Mm-hmm.
disorders. It's
Yeah.
just what they do. It's
Mm-hmm.
just, they're things that you don't think about,
Right.
right? If you've never had one and you don't treat it. And
Yeah.
that's how it is with anxiety. It's like, oh, I'm starting to be able to understand when someone says certain things or they feel a certain way, why they're not able, you know, why dealing with this mechanical low back pain
Mm-hmm.
is so difficult. You know, it's so hard for them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because there's so much more complexity to them as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, you know, the low back pain is, I don't know, maybe a representation of the fact that, like, things in their life are not in alignment. Maybe they lack integrity based on the definition that you talked about. Like it's just things are not matching up. And physical pain is just something that is happening. Like they're not injured, and it'll probably resolve when it resolves, but helping them understand that. So yeah, thank you for the book. And I really enjoyed it.
So, well, I'm sure the counselors would love to kick around some of these ideas too. So maybe we'll figure out a time to grab lunch earlier in the semester or something you and I can certainly chat again, but it'd be great to get some of their thoughts too. So
I'm adding this epilogue because Brock and I ran out of time and we didn't get to discuss everything that I wanted to talk about. One of the topics that we didn't get to that I was hoping that we'd be able to spend a little bit more time on is the concept of anxiety as an identity. In the book, the author addresses a situation where living in a chronic state of high alert, so that would be chronic anxiety, can become a person's identity. These people may actually come to romanticize their stress and anxiety. They may wear it like a badge of honor, without which they would be a lesser person or, worse, lose a sense of purpose. When we become so identified with mental habit loops that they become our identity, we think this is who we think that we are. So more often than not, this type of thinking has grooved a deep pattern in our brains to the point that we have identified with our habits. So it's like saying, I am a smoker or I am anxious. This is called perspective thinking. So let's say someone assumes anxiety as part of their identity because they are often in this state of high alert. Then their comfort zone may actually be a state of high alert. So anxiety may be their comfort zone. Now, without anxiety, they would feasibly need to live without a sensation that is quote unquote normal to them. Now, in any context, not just dealing with anxiety, when you ask someone to move outside of their comfort zone, their survival brain starts to kick in and start to send warning signals. So let's imagine a person with chronic anxiety who has successfully decreased their anxiety. They've been working with a counselor, they've been practicing some form of mindfulness, and anxiety is starting to mellow out. But they're in this therapeutic process, which most people would describe as positive and healthy. So their anxiety is going down. That's a good thing. But as anxiety decreases, it forces this person to live outside of their comfort zone. So in this scenario, the big question that I have is, can a lack of anxiety actually cause someone to become more anxious? And how would you address that? So when you're helping a person live outside of their comfort zone, what happens to them when they lose their identity? Because that's another big factor. If you've been living with chronic anxiety, let's say for decades, and you romanticize it, let's say that you actually think it is productive and it has become your identity. And now we're asking you, or you're asking yourself to shed that identity. Would this person benefit more from something like a growth mindset, looking at it as an FGO, that effing growth opportunity? But would that help them live outside their comfort zone while simultaneously shed their identity? Because these things have to happen at the same time. We need you to step outside of your comfort zone and at the same time assume a new identity and let all of this other stuff go. And going back to the complexity, as someone who doesn't suffer from this, and someone who doesn't treat it professionally, and I don't have any training in it, reading this book, this was a big question because it just seems like this circle where we decrease the symptoms and the decrease of the symptoms causes the symptoms to increase. And we ask someone to be someone that they're not, which feasibly would cause anxiety, or I don't understand the effect that it would have on someone. If not being anxious is outside of your comfort zone and causes you to become more anxious, is growth mindset enough? The world outside of your comfort zone is unfamiliar, but it's not always dangerous. And I think logically people could wrap their mind around that. But in the moment that you're experiencing these symptoms, can you tell yourself that? Like, does that work? I guess, like, how, as a healthcare provider, how do you connect the dots? Those are my questions. But you can add a different zone between a comfort zone and a danger zone. And I think this was, for me, is something interesting to think about. So we have our comfort zone. And if you step outside that comfort zone, you are now in a danger zone. So if your comfort zone is anxiety, you step outside the danger zone, or you step outside of the comfort zone, now you're in a danger zone, which feasibly could trigger anxiety again. But can we put a zone in between comfort zone and danger zone? And that would be the growth zone. So yes, we need you to step outside of your comfort zone, but not into a danger zone, into a growth zone. And to me, that is so powerful. And I think that it translates well into pain management, because so often people, maybe they're not in pain right now, but they are so afraid of certain things. So they're afraid of activities or scenarios because that's outside of their comfort zone. And they've learned that pain is imminent, or they believe pain is imminent when they step outside of that zone. So they feel like they're stepping into injury, into pain, into danger. But, and possibly if you take too big of a step, yeah, that could be it. But can we take a smaller step into this in-between zone, into this growth zone? And I just love that concept. And this isn't something this is actually like a large part of the book. And I think it's a running theme throughout the book. And it's something, again, that struck me. And when we're looking at management strategies, we talked about the four that the author talked about. So willpower, substitution, priming your environment, and mindfulness. He does have a great quote in here. And actually, I think this is, for me, one of the best quotes of the book. For sustainable change, you need something that is practical and always at the ready, so you can pull it out whenever you need it. I mean, I think that's applicable for everything, not just anxiety, even for, let's say, low back pain. Having to go to a chiropractor, feeling like you need to go to a chiropractor to have your spine realigned every time you have spine pain or anything going on, that's not practical, and it's not always at the ready. So it's not sustainable. So I think with my patients, I believe, or at least I've made a conscious effort to try and ask them more, what do you really want? Because if someone doesn't want sustainable change, they want symptom treatment, that then pushing sustainable change is pointless, because that's not what they want. And there are scenarios where that'll happen. So, maybe someone is a truck driver, and they've got neck pain and they can't turn their head. They have to be able to do it. Well, we got to treat those symptoms. And they may not, at that point in their life, be interested in sustainable change options. And I respect that. Most people, though, regardless of the scenario, do want sustainable change. They would love to feel like they don't have to go to a healthcare provider as often. And they would love to feel like they're not broken. And they would love to understand what's going on. And if they can't understand it deeply, at least understand what it's not, so that they don't have to be afraid of it. And then find a way to be mindful and present and deal with it themselves, because that is sustainability. So again, I think if you're looking for a great book, even if you don't suffer from anxiety, I can't recommend this book enough. There are so many other topics. I'm looking around because I have notes spread out all over my desk. So I was hoping, I think Brock and I probably could have stayed on this podcast for about 3 hours and we wouldn't have gotten through all of my questions. So maybe if we have the opportunity to record another discussion, I may do a part 2 to this. More than likely, we'll just go get lunch and you'll never hear of the discussion. But if I can leave you with anything, check out this book. The book is Unwinding Anxiety. And if If you feel like you have any anxiety issues, go talk to someone about it, because there are a lot of options out there that don't take a lot of time and that are sustainable because they come from within you. And I think that's the idea of that bigger, better offer. It's not about substituting something else. It's about looking internally and finding a way to have that bigger, better offer come from you, not from something else, which I think is really, really powerful, regardless of what you're dealing with, whether it be mental health, anxiety, or physical pain. Um, there seems to be quite often a bigger, better offer, or several bigger, better offers, and they are not cookie cutter. So I couldn't just say 3 better ways to do this, although there are things that work more often than not for a lot of people. So you could start there, but just have realistic expectations, I guess. All right. Thanks for listening.